All right, here we are learning about this week's Torah portion, which, according to some opinions, is the dividing point for the book of Numbers into three separate books, and consequently making 7 books of the Torah, not 5. Instead of the Pentateuch, it should be the Septateuch, or whatever. I don't know what I would call it. In other words, we talked about this before. This week's Torah portion, which is Ba'alotcha, is talking about, begins with Aaron lighting up these lights, the lamps, and the candelabra, which was in the Holy Temple, tabernacle. That's what it begins with. But this week's reading is really divided into 3 portions. 3 portions, which really make 2 more books of the Torah. Right near the end, there's this 2 sentences which we say when we take the Torah out of the ark. And it was when when the ark traveled, and Moses said, raise up God and take care of your enemies. And then there's a sentence after that, and when it rested, God said, rest. Okay, 2 sentences. Some people say these 2 sentences are 1 book of the Torah. And what was before it is a book. What's after it is another book. So it comes out that the book of Numbers is divided into 3 books. What's before these 2 sentences? Right from the beginning of Numbers up to these 2 sentences is 1 book of Numbers. These 2 sentences is a 2nd book of Numbers. And what comes from this book, from these 2 sentences until the end of the book of Numbers, is a 3rd book of Numbers. So instead of 1 book of Numbers, there's really 3. In other words, meaning that there's 2 additional books of the Torah. So the Rebbe said, what do you have to do all this for? What's the purpose of the whole thing? There's an opinion in the Talmud. The opinion is not accepted, but it still is an opinion, and it's in truth. It's a truth. So what do you have to divide it into 7? Number two, if you really do divide it up into 7, it ends up that this last book that we're talking about starts off on a very bad note, that the Jewish people are complaining about absolutely nothing. That's not a way to begin a book of the Torah, talking about how the Jews complain. Okay, so the Rebbe says, okay, let's leave that for a minute, and let's look at another thing which will help us to understand this. Why is it that this division occurs in our Torah portion? Why is it the division of the book of Numbers into 3 separate books? It happens in our Torah portion, right? These 2 sentences, which, according to that opinion, constitute another book of the Torah and divided into 3 books. This occurs in Ba'alotcha. So it says, let's look at what is Ba'alotcha. What does it mean, Ba'alotcha? This is a commandment from God to Aaron, to Moses, to tell Aaron that he should raise up the flames of the menorah. Raise up, Ba'alotcha. It says, what does it mean, raise up? It said, the language of Rashi is, Shelahevet Ula mi'aleha, that the flame should go up on its own. In other words, when Aaron lights the candles in this candelabra, the menorah, in the tabernacle, temple, as he should make sure not to remove the stick or whatever that he's lighting this candle with. Don't remove it until he's sure that the flame goes up and is independent. It's to go up and to be independent. So from the Rebbe says, okay, if we say that this was just a commandment in the tabernacle, it's a good commandment, but the fact is it wasn't. The whole idea of the Jewish people in general is to change the whole world, to make the world a blessed and meaningful place, the whole world, to reveal all the potential good which is contained in every single human being. But the Jews have to be activated themselves, and that's Aaron's job. He activates the Jewish people. And one of the ways he does it is by lighting these candles. By lighting these candles in the temple, is that helps activate the Jewish people, because you have to realize we're talking about a spiritual thing here. So spiritual things are not necessarily activated by physical things. It's not so logical. Not so logical. So what did Aaron do? He made the flame, first of all, he made it a flame. And also the flame went up. And also the flame went up on its own. So we said, what does this mean? That's what we're going to be for. We said that first of all, it has to be a flame. A flame is something that gives light and gives warmth, shines. That's what a Jew has to be. Number two, it has to go up. What does it mean it has to go up? It has to constantly increase. A person has to constantly increase, whether spiritually, physically, and to inspire others as well, to change his whole surrounding, so that the whole surrounding should be also illuminated with meaning and blessing. Everyone should know there's a creator, and the creator is creating everything with love. And it should go up, the flame should go up on its own. What does it mean on its own? That it should become part of your nature. You're not just doing it because you're religious or because somebody else tells you, because a rabbi. You're realizing that this is the truth. That this is really your true identity, to be good, to spread good, to increase good, that it should come from you. You should be self-inspired. This service, that it should go up on its own, has to be, whether regarding to yourself or regarding others and regarding to the world. We're going to see. Okay, we got up to about here. This is where we got up to last time. Okay, let's talk about how to apply this principle of a flame going up on its own. How do we apply this to our personal service of God? Hagam, even though the Avodah Yehudi did a service of a Jew, near mitzvah of Torah, or that the commandments are a lamp and the Torah is a light. This begins from God. Right? A person is a child, as he is empowered by God. Horav, also his parents teach him. Like it says, Beis Shutfim, hold us all. Says there's three partners in a person's birth: God and his two parents. Right? God and his parents. So it's coming from the outside, right? But nevertheless, this has to permeate a person totally. That the person, his inspiration to serve God, his motivation to serve God comes from himself. It's not a thing that just comes from, that God made me a Jew and my parents taught me this way. Suddenly you feel from yourself that that's who I am. I'm a Jew or a human being. I'm a human being. I'm created to make the world a better place. The flame has to go up, and it has to be on its own. Torah, or just like it is in the light of the Torah, just like the beginning of learning the Torah. A Jew receives from the Torah and from his teacher and from his rabbi, Shalom Edimo, that learns with him Torah, but he has to in the end, use these principles and the knowledge that he received so that he works more. He himself has to make effort and work at the Torah until it becomes part of him, engraved in his mind and in his heart, until the Torah becomes united with him, to the degree that he doesn't need his teacher anymore. He graduates from his teacher, and he can become a teacher. But let's get to first of all, the point is until the Torah becomes his Torah, because it's his Torah. Ad Adarabah, who nase mechadesh umashpia b'Torah, that he actually can bring new understanding and deeper comprehension of the Torah to himself. That's what means that the flame goes up, he's increasing on his own. He himself becomes independent and he can learn the Torah, and he doesn't have to have his teacher anymore. The Chiddush of not in Torah, that's the whole, even more, the whole novelty of the giving of the Torah, even though the Torah was already given by God to the Jewish people, and with the power of God, the Jewish people, they can learn Torah. Something like we said, Ba'alot Chat Nerot, this is only because Aaron has to light the candles. But God gave the Torah in such a way that the Torah, Lo B'Shamayim Hi, after God gave the Torah to the Jews, the Torah was no longer, so to speak, in the hands of God. God Nimsar L'Bnei Yisrael, he gave it to the Jewish people. Davka Beis Din Shlamata, the judicial court, they have the ability to make laws until finally God himself, he comes down to the judicial court below, and he inquires, what's the law? He asked what the law is. Because God, when he put the Torah in the world, this is very, very strange. God putting the Torah in the world, he put it in the hands of the rabbis. Of course, there's the standards to be a rabbi. Not anybody can just get together, four guys on this corner and make up your own laws of the Torah. There's very strict the criteria of who a rabbi can be. But nevertheless, once these criteria are met, for instance, in the Sanhedrin, etc., once these criteria are met, then the Torah is in the hands of these rabbis. And to the degree that it even says that there's a whole thing with the Baba Metzia, other places, that God argues with the court and the judicial court, and the judicial court disagrees with God, and God smiles, Nitzchuni bani nitzchuni, you defeated me. Even Torah, because the Torah is in a way because the Torah, God gave the Torah to the Jews in a way that the Torah becomes independent, independently owned. The Jews become independent, so to speak, from the Torah. From how do you say, the Jews can decide according to the principles of the Torah. They can decide independently. The Torah is now in the hands of the Jews. Of course, it has to be according to the principles of the Torah, but nevertheless, Alder says similarly, when a person learns on himself, he learns something many, many times. Shona Perikom Mea time. We talked about this before. A person learns the Torah 100 times until it becomes part of him, and then afterwards, he says he learns an additional time, not because it's something lacking by him. He knows everything in the Torah, but nevertheless, he wants to break his nature. The same thing it is by Ner Mitzvah. The same thing it is also by a person with the commandments, Kiyoma commandments, Shlemus Avoda, the completion of serving God is Kasher Hu Margil et Gufo. He accustoms his body to do the commandments in a way automatically. What does it mean automatically? Al derech himata lemudem nafsh, just like a person eats automatically because it keeps him alive. A person does the commandments automatically because it keeps his soul alive. But it's not that he's doing the commandments like a robot without any feeling. No, he's doing it in a way malim b'kodesh, namely that he feels and thinks and contemplates and appreciates the godliness more and more and more in the commandments. He's always amazed by the commandments that he does. All right, so therefore a person should appreciate the commandments more and more. Menosef, in addition to his service of God and Torah and the commandments, also it has to be, not only should he continue, increase in his appreciation of God in the Torah and in the commandments, but also in his day-to-day life. Like it says, all of your deeds should be for the sake of heaven, and you should know God in everything you do. That everything you do in the course of the day, not just in the time when you're learning Torah, doing the commandments, should be permeated so much with Shiviti Hashem Negedi Tamid. I will put God before me always, until all of the deeds and all of your ways and everything that a person does, even when a person eats, when he sleeps, when he's working in his business, when he's dealing in the world, it should be a shalahavet olam me'aleh. It should be like a flame that goes up on its own. Namely, what that you yourself are inspired by yourself to want to serve God more all the time. From yourself, minag, everything that you do on your own, and as you don't do it in order to go to heaven, in order to avoid hell, in order to impress people, in order to do whatever, you do it because you're a Jew or you're a creation of the world. You automatically, really genuinely feel a love and appreciation of God. And also with other people. That you really have an influence, a true, genuine influence on others can only be when a person, he himself is genuine with himself. That when he leaves the person that he's talking to, the person himself becomes also self-motivated. In other words, he doesn't serve God because of anything. He serves God, right, because of anything external. He serves God just because it's the truth. Truth is not an external thing to him. Truth becomes something that he himself wants to do. That's what it's called, a flame going up on his own. Because this becomes his whole existence. So his nature, his what do you want to call it? His nature. And in such a way that it becomes the person can, how do you say, stand firmly individually, and he doesn't have to have peer pressure or okay from his rabbi or from others to encourage him to serve God more and to do what he's supposed to. That's called a flame goes up on his own. That's what Aaron brought to the Jewish people. We can say even more than this, the service of this flame going up on its own, it has to be in two ways. One way is that even though that on himself, the physical body of a Jew doesn't shine, is a lamp for God, and all the things that he does is for the sake of heaven. Nevertheless, we can work on our body, on our habits, and we can accustom it in a way that it becomes what's called a second nature. This is in the Tanya, talks about the Benoni and the Tzaddik. A Benoni is a person that he has to force himself all the time. He has to force himself, use his willpower. Fa'ad teva rishon, until finally he forces himself until that becomes his nature. She'akayim, that he wants to do Torah and the commandments because he's a Jew. That's what a Jew does. But nevertheless, it's when he has to force himself, this is, so to speak, an extra thing to his nature. On his own, on his own, he's not relevant to loving God and to fearing God, but he forces himself. And what's the point? The proof? The proof is that he has to force himself in order to serve God. That's one way of doing it. Another way is all by means of this, when a person accustoms himself to do what is right, and in the case of a Jew, to accustom himself to do Torah and the commandments, so even his physical body, becomes attached to God. Like the language where it says, "Hamitziut emitit yesh nivra hu hamitziut yesh emiti." that the existence of the physical world, the creation, becomes the existence of the creator. Remember, we just finished learning that in Hasidut. We see God eye to eye, the same eye that God sees us, and the same reason that he creates us, and the same value that God values us, right? As that's how we look at ourselves from God's eyes. And then our service of a Jew, how do we do this? By accustoming ourselves and forcing ourselves to serve God in a natural way. Then the service of God is it is not just an additional thing to him. And miyad, the Palmer Rishon, immediately when he begins, even with, I'm sorry, yes, cave and sin, shemitziyoso atzmo kashura imayeshamiti, because eventually it becomes that his whole being becomes attached to the creator, which that's the fact. The fact is all there is God, all this is the creator, but we have an ego that separates it. Says the Rebbe, it's good. That's what God wants. But he wants this ego that you have that separates you, so to speak, to make you unique, and that you should use this in a special, separate way in order to serve the creator. And this should be done automatically. God is the one who's creating you in this special way, that your existence is connected to the true existence. And by God, so to speak, ein chiluk, there's no difference whether you're how you were in the first time and how in the second time, or the third time, and etc. In other words, a Jew naturally does not serve God. Nobody naturally puts on tefillin or keeps Shabbat, right? There are some people that naturally they don't kill. But even those people, they can be taught in 1 second to kill, murder. We just saw the German people just, 80 years ago? The most cultured and proper people, and they all become a nation of murderers. Everyone was so happy, when they conquered France, how many people they killed over there. Oh, they're happy we conquered land. What happened? So it says that a person by his nature does not serve God. But if a person forces himself to do what's right, eventually he realizes that it really is right. That it really is right. Life really is valuable. That the tefillin really do come from God. The commandments really do. Then what happens is that every second becomes brand new. And by God, there's no difference between it's the first time, second time. When you feel God, then every time it always becomes interesting and alive. Automatic. What we can say, Rabboda, this whole is that first of all, a person has to, begin by serving God. Since the body conceals over the soul, it has to be that you force yourself. And by means of purifying your body, by means of this, you reveal that the power and the potential in the body, the very body, the physical of a Jew. And this is the idea of a flame going up on its own, that you accustom yourself and refine yourself until you become automatically linked with the truth. As we'll talk about more, God willing, tomorrow. And now let's do the Yom Yom. 1 minute. There. And then 1 minute. The world has to be purified. This is a Yom Yom. These are sayings of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson, that were gathered by his successor, the Lubavitcher Rebbe. The world has to be purified. The atmosphere of the world has to be purified. Purified air comes from the words of Torah. The words of Torah offer protection in general, and for each individual specifically. The division of the 6 orders of the Mishnah to be memorized is intended when you walk in the road. the Mishnah, one Mishnah or two recited from memory, wherever a person is, this illuminates the bond between the Jewish people and God. The letters of the word Mishnah are the same letters as neshama, soul. It is very difficult to find the words to express the tremendous benefit, with God's help, and the general and individual protection that constant repetition of Mishnah will bring. And there are no words to describe the tremendous gratification one gives to God. May he be blessed by saying words of Mishnah by heart. Have a good day with Moshiach. Now, God willing, at 3:00, we will continue our learning. Today, we'll learn about the Jews complaining about the manna in the desert. Hope to see you then.